coming.
I'm not sure that the world is ready to receive this.
If you don't answer the fire bell when you're a fireman, things burn to the ground. And that's exactly what's going to happen to America. It's going to burn to the ground.
Get out, get out, get out.
Recession, depression, currency wars, trade wars, and you know the rest, world war.
I see a total systemic collapse of the United States. I see a total systemic collapse of the US dollar and the financial system, which is why I urge everybody to get out, get out, get out.
$100 trillion economic extinction level event is about to strike America. Viewer discretion is advised.
Plan. How you're going to protect yourself, your family, and your kids. And this is not about politics. It's about being safe. It's about surviving. The plan? Number one, get a gun. Buy one legally, learn how to shoot it, and be primed to use it. And I don't care if you get a long gun, a handgun, a revolver, a semi-automatic, get whatever gun you can handle. And don't let anyone talk you out of it. The Second Amendment to the Constitution and the United States Supreme Court confirm your right to have one. And it's time to stop pussyfooting around, time to stop this politically incorrect nonsense, worrying about other people's feelings, pull out all the stops, and start fighting for the survival of this country and our way of life. We are living in dangerous times. Ladies and gentlemen, the jackals are at the door.
Zbigniew Brzezinski's world-dominating elitist management of Eurasia is completing its final maneuvers on the grand chessboard. As the United States, a hijacked world superpower government, veers down the path to an engineered final endgame towards completion of a corporocratic New World Order. The primacy of the last remaining superpower, i.e. the United States, and the importance of destabilization in the Middle East and the acquisition of the wealth of Eurasia has reached its summit. Now the next phase is being unleashed on an unsuspecting populace. In the words of Albert Pike, Satanist, Ku Klux Klan founder, and revered prophet of the New World Order, in the Third World War, we shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Upon those ashes, the New World Order of Albert Pike, David Rockefeller, George Soros, the Bilderberg Group, the royalty of Europe, the great work of the higher Masonic orders.
They really are issues of the construction of a new world order.
Very short. Economic collapse would take place with lightning speed. No warning, boom. Next day, banks are shut. And by the time you realize what's happening, people will be already storming the banks and supermarkets trying to stock up. Everyone needs cash. You better get that taken care of, and fast. Waiting until it actually happens is waiting too long. You were too late. Could you make it without access to any financial tools or bank cash? A word to the wise, prepare.
Security experts and defense analysts warn that what's coming in the next 5 months or less will put an end to our civilization, throwing the U.S. into a new dark age where blood and fire will rule the streets. No radio stations, no medical services, no trash pickups, no subways, no newspaper delivery, no newspapers at all, no heat, no elevators, no water from the tap, no cell phones, no police cars, no food, no help. It's a real turkey shoot, and we're standing on the wrong side of the rifle. My colleagues and I are ready to fight to the last man to ensure the survival of the American family. But there's no way of telling how successful our efforts will be. I can only pray this message reaches you in time, before the bloodshed that will kill more than 281.8 million Americans is set in motion. Just another hectic day in the Capitol. Nothing unusual about this scene, you might say. Not until the first sound of explosion close to the Pentagon, and then two more in strategic points of central subway stations, leaving thousands of people trapped underground. People start panicking and desperately take to their mobile phones to find out what's happening, only to discover all networks are down. A situation reminiscent of the 9/11 attack. Other explosions are detonated on main bridges and city streets. Terrified people flee the scene and leave their cars piled up all over town. Passengers on metro buses are thrown violently out of their seats as the buses bounce hard and shut down. With traffic at a standstill, another explosion detonates near Lafayette Park. Within seconds, the downtown electrical grid within a 4-block area is kaput. Nobody has the slightest idea what's going on. Police helicopters flying over the affected areas crash into the crowded streets below as their engines' power circuitry is cut off. TV and radio stations strive to broadcast breaking news of possible terrorist attacks, but with no luck. The city's power lines and satellites are down. People collapse in the street as their pacemakers halt. Old people fall to the ground, deafened by the horrible screeching sounds made by their hearing aids gone haywire. Security alerts jolt the Pentagon as state officials watch powerless, the data on the screen disappearing before their very eyes.
This is not a test. The emergency alert system has been activated. Please follow local and federal authority in your area. This is not a test.
The Emergency Operations Center is buzzing with chaos as the president and his military team try to regain control of the affected sectors. What happened here was a series of coordinated EMP attacks that quickly destroyed Washington's power grid and disabled all communication systems.
An EMP, or electromagnetic pulse, is an electromagnetic discharge that fries all electrical circuits within minutes, even seconds. Most modern-day appliances, the gadgets we use daily, and even the U.S. power grid all have sensitive circuits built in. Military command and control, as well as most of the high-tech equipment, are all very vulnerable to an EMP. Our enemy's plan is designed to take advantage of the traffic choke points in Washington City and use localized terrorist units to set off small-scale EMP blasts that will disrupt the city power grid and disable all machines operating on electricity. Halting traffic on the bridges and inside the city prevents emergency vehicles from reaching areas where bombs are detonated. The cars on the bridge were fired upon by special rifles that shoot radio frequencies instead of regular bullets. This type of weapon can easily be built for as little as $400 with easy-to-obtain parts. The operating principle is simple, much like a super soaker water gun. Water in a container, air pressure pumped in to the chamber, combine water and high pressure air in a tube, and out comes a powerful sprinkle. Same goes for a radio frequency device. Inside a tube, you wrap a magnetic field with a copper coil surrounded with capacitors. Charge up the capacitors, and add in a good energy source, such as an ignited C4 explosive, and bang! You're firing a stream of highly charged atomic particles towards an electronics-based target, like a car's electronics, an iPhone, someone's pacemaker, their national security communication systems. You get the point. The only thing is, you can't dry off radio frequencies on the exposed target like you would dry off water splashed from a water gun. These objects will simply have to be replaced.
And while our military's interception system is reduced to a deaf and dumb condition, a quiet submarine approaches our waters close enough to set off the final blow that sends America back to the Dark Ages. Because all it takes is just one missile with an EMP weapon attached to it to be detonated above the United States, and the effects are irreversible. An EMP device strategically detonated at an altitude of 20 miles above land will permanently disintegrate our power grid and plunge America into silence and darkness indefinitely. Clogged streets, no public transport, grocery and convenience stores run out of food and emergency supplies before being completely torn down by hungry, desperate people. Financial systems crash, Wall Street, banks, ATMs, they're all cooked as the American economy drops offline. Hospitals all over the affected areas are scenes of chaos and carnage as backup generators and battery-powered systems slow down and die. Respirators, cardiac monitors, intravenous drip pumps, and dialysis machines all stop. Patients die, first by the scores, then by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Hordes of military police are deployed all over the country to maintain some sense of law and order, but they are soon overwhelmed by all the desperate people fighting for their lives. And they realize it's beyond their power to control this world quickly spiraling out of control. None of this is science fiction. It is science fact. Scientists calculated that a single high-altitude burst 200 miles above Kansas could spread an EMP pulse across the entire continental United States. And beyond the major city centers, the damage will be done in countless ways, large and small. A blast over Pittsburgh can rapidly turn to dust virtually all agriculture and bulk transportation east of the Mississippi and north of Tennessee. The big farms, dependent on power for everything from milking machines to harvesting combines, will silently shut down, starving our people. The power industry is the foundation of our American civilization. From the massive hydroelectric dams and their generators to the hundreds of thousands of miles of power lines that stretch across the continent, to the local substations, to the transformers that hang on the pole down the street from your house, to the breaker box in your basement. All of this will be rendered useless. The electronics we use today are so much more complex and interdependent that the danger of one failure triggering another is higher than ever. Systems all across the country are often operating beyond capacity. New power plants are being built farther away from end users, creating miles of exposed transmission lines. Vital electronic systems are remotely managed and thus more at risk. Even without a power grid disaster, the big electrical transformers are made overseas and have a minimum 1 to 3 year production backlog. As Dr. William Graham, who chaired the 2008 EMP Commission, pointed out, any recovery of any one of the key infrastructures is dependent upon the recovery of others. The longer the outage, the more problematic and uncertain that the recovery will be. It is possible, he said, for the functional outages to become mutually reinforcing until at some point the degradation of infrastructures could have irreversible effects on the country's ability to support its population.
When this house of cards collapses, which it will, a systemic shock will disrupt our lives in ways you never thought possible. You will suddenly be locked out of your own bank account, unable to withdraw cash, or deposit a check. Your stocks will swing wildly out of control. You won't even be able to access your Social Security money. Like a virus, it will spread to our food supply chain, causing massive shortages in the cities and suburbs. The same thing will happen to our gas network. America's highways will become quiet and empty. And one by one, every service you've come to depend on, from your bank to your grocery store to our federal government, will shut down. You won't be able to get cash, and without cash, you won't be able to buy food or gasoline. And what happens to America then? As a society, we are now more than ever dependent on convenience, on free government services instead of our own hard work, on credit instead of our own hard-earned cash. What happens when people can't use their credit cards? When they can't drive to get their checks because there's no gas? When the only thing you can count on is cash, and no one seems to have any of it? Will you be able to rely on your neighbors, your fellow citizens? Well, lately I'm not so sure. Now I realize that to someone who hasn't been studying this for 35 years, the idea of a serious crisis like that hitting America may not seem possible. After what I'm about to tell you, I think you'll reconsider. Quote, literally, your ATM wouldn't work. You type in your code, no money comes out. You get your paycheck, you can't cash it, close quote. Those are the words of the architect of the 2008 bank bailouts, Treasury Department insider Neel Kashkari. What he's describing is a crisis that you and I came very close to experiencing just a few years ago. If it sounds similar to what I'm describing, it's for a good reason. Former Secretary of the Treasury Tim Geithner has stated, "We came exceptionally close. You could hear the fear and the panic, because anybody living in that world at that time, running a business at that time, knew that we were on the edge of losing the capacity to function." This has been confirmed by former Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson, as well as two former congressmen. And while President Obama assured Americans that, quote, the shadow of the crisis has passed in his State of the Union address, I recently came across video footage of Janet Yellen, the current chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, openly admitting that the U.S. is still facing a very real threat. We could find ourselves in a devastating spiral, says Janet Yellen. She goes on to assure everyone that the Federal Reserve is fully in control of the situation, but the truth is that by their own standards, the Fed's policies have not worked. In fact, official records indicate that the highest levels of our government have already spent $4.5 trillion trying to contain this threat, more than we spent on World War II. It's a desperate move, and I don't think they'll be successful. As I write, the U.S. economy is in a slump. This is despite the biggest stimulus of new cash and credit in history.